These little NAS devices, specifically from Synology, have come so far in recent years that I'm getting closer to the point of where I start to question the idea of owning your own server, unless you like to tinker, of course. Owning your own server, building it from scratch, managing it, and dealing with the higher power consumption is even worth it. So in today's video, I want to talk about the Synology DS1621xs Plus and how it is possibly bridging that gap between small NASs that usually can't really do too much to full-blown servers that we rely on for a multitude of different things, and why you don't really necessarily need a big server anymore. What's up YouTube? Jason here with Byte My Bits, and this is the Synology DS1621xs. Okay, it's not. This is actually the previous model. I think it was a 1618. Synology sent this to me a long time because I had one need. I wanted to back up my entire house, everything in my house, with the exception of like the primary media content, but everything else, including image backups of all of my computers and critical data on my servers, B&B related content, assets that I use all the time, etc. They sent me this device with the help of Western Digital providing 6 14 terabyte hard drives in order to back everything up. I've made videos before that in the past. You can see those at the end-screened links or the cards above. And yes, full disclosure, Synology did provide me with not only this old NAS, but the newer NAS model that I'm talking about today, and the expansion 5-bay DX517 unit as well. There's also more stuff, but I'll get to that in a minute. However, they are not dictating the direction of this video and or manipulating my own opinions on said devices. So with that said, this is the old one. I'm talking about the new one. I can't talk about the new one now without bringing down a lot of active things that I have going on in the background. Right now, I am uploading all of the photos and videos from my phone. It's analyzing it using their AI technology. It's breaking down photos with, people, places, and things, like literally like, hey, this is food and this is Bob. It's kind of crazy, but all this is going on right now, and I got a lot of stuff to back up. So I'm just kind of letting that run. On top of that, I have active backup solutions that are staggered throughout all of my households, so bringing it down is just, right now, not an option. But I will record some stock footage of it plugged in and blinking. You see it like over there or something. I had to have a prop though. But this is the real Synology DS1621xs Plus. It supports up to 6 standard 3.5-inch hard drives. Comes stock with 8 gigabytes of RAM, but can be expanded up to 32 gigabytes of DDR4 ECC memory. It is scalable up to 16 drives with 2 DX517 units. These units are connected via the eSATA ports on the back. For the processor, it's built in with an Intel Xeon D1527 4-core 8-thread 2.2 gigahertz processor that can ramp all the way up to 2.7 gigahertz. Inside, it has the option to add 2 NVMe cache SSDs. On the back, it comes stock without any need of an expansion port, although it does have a PCI expansion slot available. It comes stock with 1 10 gigabit per second NIC and 2 1 gigabit per second NICs. You also get a total of 3 USB 3.0 ports, one of which being on the front of the device. Now, something to note here is that the 10 gigabit NIC that comes pre-built in to the system is an RJ45. No fiber, no SF, none of that. It's RJ45. So as long as you're using, what is it? The minimal is like Cat 5e, can do short distance 10 gig networking. Cat 6 is probably your best bet. Cat 6a, a little bit better because, I look for all of my devices to have RJ45 because I have an RJ45 10 gig network switch that has 24 ports, and I like hooking anything and everything I can up to that switch. But since we're on the subject of talking about some of the upgrades between what Synology sent me first and the new Synology, this is the old one. As you can see, it has 2 10 gig NICs here that utilize the PCI expansion slot to gain that 10 gigabit per second connectivity. So to me, that was a huge upgrade from the old one to the new one, just getting that slot built in in and not having to waste your PCI port. So when I heard that, I thought to myself, hey, I can add NVMe caches. That'd be cool. Oh, never mind. It has 2 of those built in already. I do want to say that the NVMe slots that you can access on the inside of the NAS cannot be used to create an SSD volume. You can only use these slots as cache slots. The cache slots themselves, if you use NVMe cache with the Synology NASs, it greatly improves performance, but it's extremely hard to synthetically prove it. When I got this drive, I did a bunch of backup stuff. I also started using this as my primary torrent downloading box, right? Because I download a lot of Ubuntu ISOs, right? And I share a lot of these ISOs because I want to play an active part of the Ubuntu community and I want to share these, free files for people to download, hopefully at fast speeds, right? I tried to move it to this, and it kind of worked, but it kind of didn't. Basically, if you're familiar with torrenting, there's a lot of file checks. They make sure a piece of a file is there. If not, it'll have to recheck it. And if it messes up during rechecking, it'll say it's corrupt or offline or whatever. So you have to go in there, you have to tell it to go again. It's a big, long thing. So when I tried to switch everything over to the old one, I just had a bunch of issues with my torrent client. So I ended up having to either just see only a few of those Ubuntu ISOs, or B, just use a hard drive that was already on my computer. But when I switched over to the new NAS, and Synology was kind enough to send me over 2 of these. These things didn't even pop up in the menu when I installed them. The SNV 3400 400 gigabytes NVMe drives. These things are amazing. They make all of the difference in the world, not right up front, extremely hard to test synthetically, but I did 2 tests. Actually, when it comes to editing files on the NAS server, like using the files off the server, importing into Adobe Premiere Pro, I tried that, and initially I still had issues with Premiere Pro starting the playback of a video file. So for example, I would hit play and it would kind of stutter a little bit, and then it would start playing smoothly. It's like it had to access it or something, and then it would start going. But with the SSD cache, as long as these video files were kind of smaller files, if I was going through a very specific file and constantly pulling from that, constantly playing it, scrubbing through it, over a short amount of time, but over amount of time, it got better. It became a usable experience without having a bunch of delays every time I hit play, which is all well and good. But the biggest thing for me is, because I don't really always edit off of a Synology NAS, the biggest thing for me is when I added the Synology cache into the new one, I added all my hard drives, I redirected all my download folders over to the NAS. Because it's always seeding, it's always writing, and it's kind of, some of the ISOs are a little bit more popular than others. Those little bits of information are put on the NAS as objects that are accessed frequently. And I have noticed very rarely, if at all, maybe once or twice, it would actually pop up an error and say that there was an issue with the file. But my SSD cache is going full send. I mean, it's just always being used, and that is the only thing that I'm running 100% like all during the day, is those torrents. So that was a huge improvement for me. In this old one, you had to either pick with your PCI expansion slot a 10 gig NIC or an NVMe SSD. However, since then, they've come out with a combo unit, but that's not here or there because I don't have that right now. With the newer one coming with a built-in, it is a downside, yes, that you can't use these NVMe drives as its own volume, meaning you just can't write random data and you really don't have a ton of control on how the cache is handled. But on the flip side of that, Synology just kind of handles it based off your usage automatically to boost the overall performance of your server, which brings me to Plex. If you know anything about Plex, Plex requires a lot of very small metadata items, anything from poster arts, metadata, etc., that it has to constantly read and write all the time. It's primarily read, but you get where I'm going. So initially, when you start accessing a newly installed Plex media server with a ton of content, there's going to be a lot of poster arts, there's going to be a lot of metadata that you're going to have to scroll through, and probably suffer a little bit, depending on your setup, some slow speeds. Which, by the way, part of the Synology Let's Deck Out Jason adventure of theirs. They sent me two 2TB enterprise level SSDs that I ran in RAID 0, not that it mattered too much, but I just wanted the most possible space. I ran in RAID 0 to get the most capacity that I use for things like virtual machines, because the new one can handle virtual machines very easily. The new one can handle Docker very easily. And having the option to add on SSDs to install Docker on and all these, different apps that I'm running off of it, I mean, it's kind of nice. But if you don't have something like that and you're running your primary Plex media server off your main volume, which is going to be possibly a RAID 5 or a RAID 6 configuration, you will notice some slower speeds without beefing up your system with cache drives. Cache drives of which are these. I already showed you those. Never mind. By the way, if we're talking about all of the ludicrous items Synology sent me for this video, let's also talk about 32 gigs of RAM, which I thought was, I don't want to say dumb. Believe me, I'm a man of excess. I have 128 gigs of RAM in my computer. I don't know why. I was okay with 64, but it could handle 128. So that's what I did. I buy things that I don't necessarily need because I just like the idea of having more than I need. It's weird. Welcome to America. But I upgraded the 8 gigs that came with the unit to 32 gigs. Again, thank you Synology for sending me this hardware. And I originally thought, what the heck am I gonna use 32 gigs of RAM for in a NAS? I just don't know, and I was wrong. Let's just cut to the chase. I was wrong. During my testing, I installed a VM that ran Windows 10, that ran Blue Iris, was able to get everything up and running. I was able to assign, I think, 9 or 10 gigabytes worth of RAM to this. This is a 4-core multi-threading CPU, so I was able to get everything up and running and get Blue Iris running in a virtual machine because I had that extra RAM to spare. If I didn't have that extra RAM to spare, I would have been just out of luck. Side note, though, even though I did get it to run, one of the things with this NAS is that it does not have any sort of built-in GPU or hardware accelerated transcoding, which means it drastically affects things like Plex or Blue Iris, which is kind of resource intensive, especially if you don't have a GPU to offload a lot of that, horsepower that it needs to encode and, decode video. So the 1621 doesn't offer any kind of hardware acceleration. So it kind of sort of gets, in my own opinion, gets labeled more of a jack of all trades, master at none NAS versus some other NASs that Synology offers that do have Intel QuickSync, thus supporting hardware accelerated transcoding and is able to handle, transcoding streams on Plex much more efficiently. Since I am talking about that, let's talk about some of the results that I got from Plex. Originally, when I tested this, I'm gonna just go out and say it, a little embarrassing, I was only able to get 5 streams and an unreliable 1 4K transcoded stream out of the 1621. Now, these are all transcoded streams. Back to the Future being transcoded from 18 down to 2 megabits per second, and the 4K being like 60 megs all the way down to 8 megs per second. So I was struggling to get 1 4K stream, and I was struggling to get a 6th, but I did have a reliable 5 transcoded streams out of the Plex media server. It wasn't until I realized that I used the Synology NAS for the surveillance station, which pulls cameras and backs up 100% coverage of those cameras. So it is always recording video. All the time. So there were a lot of things that were still running in the background that skewed those results. Once I fixed it, I was able to get 7 very reliable transcoded streams, almost got 8, but I'm gonna go back to 7 because those are reliable, and I was easily able to get 1 4K transcoded streams, almost 2, but definitely just sticking with 1. Now 7 transcoded streams on a NAS at this price point, honestly, is not that impressive. There's other less powerful devices that handle hardware acceleration that can pump out way more streams than what this thing can do. But this is pure CPU horsepower. There's no hardware acceleration, so this is gonna be focused more on virtual machines. I'm actually running Docker and then Pi-hole. Started routing things through the Pi-hole. That was kind of cool. I think I'm gonna take this one to work. That way I can install Pi-hole on that easily and then finally have some better internet browsing experience at work on everything, including my phone. And I recently discovered something called Memories that you can download in the Synology app that allows you to take everything on your phone, all your photos and videos, and upload them directly to your NAS, which is kind of cool. You can do this with this one as well, but I didn't really discover that until I started digging into like, hey, you know, my CPU is just kind of chilling at 5% most of the time, unless I'm really hitting it with Plex. So what am I going to do with this Xeon processor to really realize the entire benefits that it offers? And that's where multitasking comes into play. You have to throw a lot at this NAS in order to get the most out of it. Sure, it's not going to get you 20 encoded streams on Plex or anything like that, but it'll transcode, let's say, 5 transcoded streams while encoding the surveillance station video, also running Docker and Pi-hole on the side, backing up and using AI to identify certain aspects of your photos from your phone. Kind of weird, but I'm letting it do its thing right now. It like says, hey, who's this person? Who's this person? And it'll like tag it and find it and just organize. It's kind of cool. I'd show you more of my photos, but I don't really want you to see all of my photos. You know, personal reasons. One major thing that I want to actually explore using more, I've kind of sort of set up, but I have to go to work and some other places to really truly appreciate this feature. It's the Synology Drive feature. Pretty much you can download a client and you can access, you know, the files that you have on your Synology NAS from any computer that you have it connected to, and it just allows you to easily drag and drop files between your home NAS and your other, let's say a work computer or a laptop or something you have out in the wild. Part of the whole Synology DSM ecosystem is that whole ease of use, ease of connectivity, which is why a lot of people buy into small devices like this. In fact, if I had to give you like a top whatever reasons as to why to buy a Synology, it would always be about size. Synology NASs are literally designed from the ground up, just like most NASs out there, to use as little space as possible. That means every single thing in here, for the most part, is as small as it can possibly get while offering as much as it can, like hard drive storage. That's not only Synology, QNAP, Western Digital PR Series. I mean, all these NASs, they're designed from the ground up to be small. Also, they are designed from the ground up to be the most power efficient, meaning that they're only going to provide you with a power supply big enough and efficient for its needs. It's not there to give you 1600 watts of power and you use 200. But on top of all that, you have Synology's own management system, DSM. It makes installing things simple. Yes, it can get complicated. You want to install Docker, you want to install Pi-hole, you want to install things that may or may not be supported or not, you know, officially launched by Synology or whatever. You can complicate things, but for the most part, adding on to the feature set of a Synology NAS is extremely easy. Managing and connecting to it externally is extremely easy, and that's what you buy into. You buy into the ease of the ecosystem itself. But more specifically, the DS1621xs Plus, well, I mean, it's a little pricey. I'm not gonna lie. You can check out the links in the description down below for updated pricing, but for the most part, it runs about $1,600, which is not cheap for a NAS. What you get with that is a powerful Xeon processor, albeit a slightly old processor, but a proven good processor nonetheless. You have the option to upgrade it with memory, RAM, SSDs, expansion units to your heart's desire and gain tons of space, tons of usability, and a NAS that could do, you know, pretty much a little bit of everything, but all at the same time. It's easy to migrate from older Synology units to newer Synology units. Just in case you don't know what I'm talking about, I did make a video about that, cards above. However, that does not mean that the Synology units, or at least this specific one, doesn't come with a few, I'm going to consider misses, cons, or just things that I wish would have been different. The first things first is the USB copy feature. There are another NAS that has an easy copy button. I think it was a really small one, had 2 of them because this one doesn't have it here. But being able to plug something into the front USB port, hit the copy button, and just automatically initializes copying everything off of that USB drive over to the NAS was super nice. Now you can set it up to automatically copy it as soon as you plug it in, but even though I didn't really dump that much time into it, I wasn't able to get it working personally. at least I couldn't get it working for an SD card that I used for my main camera. And since that would be the only reason why I would use it, I just kind of sort of gave up on that. Another thing is expandability. They still use the eSATA connection on the back. There's a lot of other NAS devices out there that use more advanced, higher speed connections, things like Thunderbolt or USB Type-C. Instead, it's eSATA, which is limited to 6 gigabits per second, which means that if you get an expansion unit of like 5 drives, you're possibly going to be slowing down your entire array because you have all 5 of those drives communicating through one single 5 or 6 gigabit per second connection. Another thing, and this is a huge deal and something that I'm going to have to do to my new NAS now because I did it to this one, but I haven't done it to the new one yet, and that is they don't include any RGB. I don't know why. They refuse it. I've sent them like 342 emails to ask them to add RGB, but they say, no, Jason, RGB stupid. I disagree. You may disagree. This box right here might disagree, but I think all the Synology NASs should come stock with RGB. Fight me. But one last thing, this is real talk, that comes with this new Synology NAS. It does not support SHR. Now, SHR is Synology Hybrid RAID. I can still use RAID 5, RAID 6, RAID 0, RAID 1, etc., but I cannot use their new hybrid technology, which allows them to mix and match drives. I have yet to have the option to play around with this, and I really want to. Like, if I got a 4 and an 8 and a 6 and a 12, and I want to be able to just throw what I have into a NAS. I want to be able to expand and add on later, just add to the pool of drives and just let it do its thing and whatever. The fact that I don't have that option to play with, which would be really nice, it kind of lets me down a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. The next NAS I review from Synology, I would love to be able to play with that technology because I have 4 terabyte drives, 8 terabyte drives, 10 terabyte drives, 12 terabyte drives. I like to just throw a mixed bag of drives into this thing and just see how well it works. Is there a big speed decrease when you're copying? I'd love to explore this new technology and see how reliable it is. It's interesting to me. So, that's kind of a downside to this unit, is that it doesn't support, it's big, it's beefy, but it doesn't support some of their latest technology. But before I close this video, I do want to talk about the real things that I've noticed from this upgrade that I have truly appreciated. Yes, the Xeon processor is great, and it adds a lot of flexibility when you want to use things like virtual machines. I don't recommend using anything heavily graphic, extensive, like, Blue Iris, for example. The interface, sluggy as all get out. It's just not built to handle anything that's going to play video. If you're just running things in the background, like a database or something, that's just going to be processing information, VMs in the Synology NAS is fantastic. If you're running something that's going to require a graphic interface, playing video or doing something like that, you're just going to have a bad time. I'm going to be right up front and say that. So without any kind of hardware acceleration built in or quick sync or anything like that, that's just something you have to deal with if you want to go down that route. But surprisingly, the biggest improvement is going to be the SSD caching. I thought it was kind of weird, right? You can't control the cache. You can't tell it what you want it to cache. It's really even difficult to synthetically, benchmark it. The only thing you know is that the longer you use your NAS, the faster it seems to get. And then you realize, oh, every time I load up Plex, it loads this metadata. It's constantly pulling these photos and this information, and now it knows it's hot data. So it knows to load that data into its cache. It knows that the torrents that I am seeding, some of them are way more popular than others. So it automatically loads that data into the SSD cache, making the IOPS way faster. It allows it to read it without any kind of errors, and it makes everything more reliable. So at this point, I'm just trying to find more things to do with the NAS because I'm barely scratching the surface. Not all of the CPU is being fully realized in its capacity, and I'm really kind of up for suggestions. If you guys have something that you run on your Synology NAS or things that you might want me to test, make sure to post those in the comments down below. I even played with the idea of Steam caching. I was gonna make a video about that, but it's like all over YouTube. You have two options, right? You can either A, set up like a Docker or a container, and you can actually make Steam caching part of one of those Dockers, and you can set it up to where if you download games from multiple computers within your network, your NAS will have a cache of all of those download files, and it will automatically save it to where it's faster to just download from your NAS than it is your internet. Option number two, which I've seen a few of these videos on YouTube, is just installing Steam files to your NAS. Because if you're playing a game and you're playing a game a lot, all of those common files, they're gonna be hosted on your cache drives. Those common files that are always pulled, called hot data, will be super responsive, especially if you have 10 gig networking capabilities. But that's it for today, guys. Again, any questions, comments, or concerns, post them in the comments down below. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe, and have yourself a great day.